Tom, we just talked to a reporter on the ground in Ottawa. It doesn't seem like much is going on now, but I know when we talked about it yesterday, there's some question as to whether authorities would be stepping up, and it looks like they are, right? They're going to actually prevent them from getting pretty much anywhere.
Once bitten, twice shy.
Yeah.
They've learned their lesson from the last time, and they've ramped up. They've brought in as many as they could of the RCMP and of the OPP. They should be okay. But, these are bikers. They're able to put on a bit of a fuss if need be. And so I would say that there's a better than average chance that there might be a bit of a dust up between now and the end of the weekend. But they especially want to avoid, letting them use our Canadian parliamentary institutions as a backdrop for hate speech, for Islamophobia, for homophobia, for hatred and racism, which is unfortunately what a lot of these people were about. And they were also going to take control of the war memorial because a couple of them were vets. Well, thank you for serving the country. That's appreciated. But no, you don't get to take over the war memorial.
And you were speaking about the hate speech and the homophobia, and Chris Sky is going to be speaking now, evidently at a different site, but nonetheless, why would this affiliation even be allowed?
If he wants to stand on the seat of his Harley and scream at the crowd, that's fine. If he goes into hate speech and he says things that are an invitation to hurt other people, then he'll get arrested. So there is such a thing as crossing a line, even in terms of freedom of speech. And the police will be there, and they'll be keeping an eye on things. And I think that we've got to learn that we're in a different world now, because just a couple of years ago, people like that would get together online. They would trade all their conspiracy theories and all their deep thoughts, and it would stay there. But now they're coming out of their computer screens, emboldened, no doubt, by the truckers, who only a few hundred of whom were able to take over Parliament Hill for weeks. People are just saying, well, let's have a protest. If you were to ask them what the protest was about, they wouldn't be able to tell you, but that doesn't seem to matter.
So we had the big announcement in Montreal today. A lot of hands being shook. We had Pierre Fitzgibbon, Francois Legault, Justin Trudeau. First of all, what I found interesting, and maybe this is not that big a deal, but they make this announcement about the Moderna vaccine facility coming to Montreal, but no one knows where it's going to be. What's that about?
Yeah,
I had the exact same reaction. So where's it going to be? In one of the the abandoned pharmaceutical outfits on the West Island? I guess they're trying to make sure that they get the best possible price. The important thing was to announce that it is really good news. This highest level pharmaceutical company will be setting up shop here, creating hundreds of jobs. I'm still waiting to see how much the actual bill is for the public first, because of course those people are there because the government's giving much, if not most, of the money to bring this shop here. Yeah. But Legault was boasting that we beat out Ontario, which we did, because Ontario was doing everything they could to get this new factory. So good on us. But again, I'm still anxious to see how much it's actually costing us and how much it's costing us per job. I think that those are fair questions.
So normally when these kinds of announcements are made, they're all too happy to talk to us, to talk about how great this is that they're doing this. We requested Trudeau, we requested Legault, we requested Duclos. I don't know who else, but they all said no. What do you make of that? What are they afraid we're going to ask them?
You're stuck with me.
Oh, never stuck with you.
That was the answer from them. Now ask Mulcair. He'll fill you in.
No, it is a very baffling situation, because they just want the set piece stage. They just want everything where every word has been planned in advance. This is an election year for Mr. Legault and every other provincial politician. So, they're keeping everything very tight. And of course, Trudeau just shows up to this thing, looks good. He's got a little bit of bad blood with Legault, because Legault really turned the screws on him during the last federal election campaign. And I'm just waiting to see how Trudeau gets him back during this one. I predict that he will.
All right. Let me ask one other thing. There have been a lot of op-eds. I read your piece, of course, in the Gazette earlier in the week, talking about Bill 96 and political parties, of course, for the most part, the new political parties that are here. And there have been some interesting takes on this. I know how you feel. You've made that fairly plain, the idea that, okay, here you go. This is probably not going to end up achieving much other than maybe splitting the vote. So Robert Libman posts in the Gazette today, like it's deja vu, as we say, all over again with these new political parties. And that's speaking as someone who's been there before, as you have as well. Are you prepared to sort of consider moderating your position on this, given the fact that we found out Quebec Solidaire, and maybe I'm that naive for having thought this to begin with, after having talked to Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois a couple of times, we thought, you know what, this guy's okay. And then we found out their platform, which includes now, because we had Ruba Gazal on earlier on, they'll go along with Bill 96. So That said, if you can't rely on yet another political party, not that perhaps most people who knew what was going on did, can we not throw these guys a bone in either of these two new political parties as if they might achieve something?
Well, I didn't know my position was immoderate, but because I think it's rather mainstream to say that neither of these parties is going to elect a single person. I think that's just obvious to anybody who follows.
But the
I don't think it's that obvious.
The Equality Party got 4 seats, though, and they mounted a campaign in only 5 months.
In a completely different context.
Okay.
They got 4 seats in a context where the most senior, respected members of the National Assembly who were from the English-speaking community, people of the caliber of Herb Marks and Cliff Lincoln, had said, we're walking away from Bourassa because he broke his word. Nothing like that has taken place. Dominic Anglade has come out foursquare against Bill 96. I think that has to be acknowledged here. These are two parties that are setting out to tilt at windmills. They're angry about Bill 96 and they're angry at the Liberals. Fine. They have every single right to set up these new parties. And by the way, I never make the argument, because it used to drive me nuts when I was in the NDP, that there's something wrong with supposedly splitting the vote. The vote doesn't belong to anybody. New parties come up all the time, and they're allowed to vie for the votes of every single Quebecer. I have no trouble with that. I'm just taking one step back from the window and looking at this as somebody who's been in public policy, who's been in public life, and who's been in politics here for over 40 years. And I'm just saying that there's no comparison whatsoever to be made between the current situation and the one that we had at the time when the Equality Party managed to get a few people elected. And by the way, they never got reelected. And we're still in that type of zone right now. That's my only point.
So, Tom, I'm going to take that bet if it's okay with you. I'll take the over at 0. You don't believe any of them are going to get elected, and I'll say
none of them is going to get elected.
I'll take one, and we'll do what we did last time we had a bet, which cost you, I believe, a bottle of wine.
It was a very good bottle of wine that I gave you.
Yeah, and I will take at least one will get elected, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay.
I will take one glass of wine from whoever wins.
Of course you will. Why am I not surprised? Yeah.
Seems fair.
Look, the other thing today, I wasn't really on top of this Luc Boileau's story, but he's coming under fire apparently for a decision made by his predecessor. I'd heard nothing about this, as I said, allowing nickel emissions near a Quebec City neighborhood to grow. He wasn't even in the job at the time.
Yeah, so Limoilou is a working-class neighborhood of Quebec City, not that far from Parliament Hill, but you have to know Quebec City a little bit. Catherine and I lived there for years. There's this whole thing about Upper Town and Lower Town, and Upper Town, that tends to be the more senior people in business and especially in government. Lower Town, especially a place like Limoilou. I mean, the Cégep de Limoilou was where I got my chops in political organizing, because that's where the Student Federation at the time used to hold its meetings when I was at Vanier College. I can tell you it was lots of fun. Fond memories of that. But right now, that very nice neighborhood, and I've been down there a couple of times protesting on this, because they're storing so much nickel ore on the docks down there in Quebec City, there's a lot of the dust that comes off it. It's this red dust, and you can see it. It's on the cars. It's on the kids' clothes when they come in. It's in their hair. But there was a norm that was set that was considered the safe norm for public exposure to this. But because nickel is such an important mineral right now in the world, in the context of batteries and electric cars, so this for us is something very important economically. So out of nowhere, the government just changed that norm and increased 5-fold the amount of nickel dust that could be in the air and decreed it to be safe. But there's no study showing that. And they're just allowing this nickel dust to go into this, this very working class, neighborhood, not the richest people. And they're just saying, yeah, we don't care if the nickel dust goes there. Now, if that nickel dust was at the bottom of Sillery, the most, glitzy, high-end area of Quebec City, they would never have changed the rule. But because this is working people, they allowed that rule to change.
Wow.
They must be, I'm just imagining how the people of Limoilou are reacting to this, Tom.
They're never going to elect somebody from the CAQ. But
sure.
There'll probably be somebody from the Conservative Party get in there.
So that's a positive thing, I suppose.
Is there a thought the government may change its position now that this is becoming an issue or not?
It's going to have to become an issue outside Quebec. This is the funny thing about these things. As long as it's just the Quebec government and the strength of Legault with his high percentage in the polls, he just doesn't care, and he doesn't care about environmental issues generally. But if it ever became an issue, if it became a thing on NBC News, they would go back to the old norm tomorrow night. But if it stays in Le Soleil, it's not going to change.
Okay.
How that?
Kind of sad.
Yeah.
But
I'm at a loss for
it's
words.
an outrageous situation.
Yeah.
But it's interesting also that the environmental movement, I mean, as you know, I'm the chairman of the board of Earth Day Canada. You know, we had a lot of events a couple of weeks ago because it was Earth Day. But what's interesting is that there's been a certain demobilization during the pandemic, and we're all noticing it. And, you know, there are lots of fights to be had, but right now there's a big war going on, and we're coming off 2.5 years of pandemic. And you know, the fight has gone out of people because this is the type of thing that normally would have mobilized a lot of people protesting and saying this is just not on.
Well, hey, Tom, sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say about priorities switching. That's literally what Mario Girard, the CEO of the port, is saying. He's like, we need to refocus priorities. I feel like this is
the only reason that we have a public health department is to take care of the public health. But it's become like everything else under Legault. It is so politicized. Yesterday we made this announcement. There's a bunch of money for environment. That's a big high five. Yay! Then you realize that what they're doing, the Horn refinery in Rwanda has been literally poisoning people's lives for decades. They completely break all the rules with regard to things like arsenic going into the atmosphere, and they get away with it. When I was the minister, I knew about it, and they knew what I was going to do, too. I was heading towards shutting the thing down. Now, Legault is saying, well, we're going to give them a bunch of money so that they can finally start reducing their emissions. But the McInnes cement factory in the gas bay, which is probably the biggest polluter in terms of greenhouse gases in Quebec, is going to get a bunch of more public money so that they can finally start doing what they have to do anyway, which is reducing their carbon footprint. But why are we taking money from the people who live in Limoilou and pay their taxes and giving it to this rich company instead of saying, look, you're either going to shut down or you're going to respect the rules out of your own pocket? And this is the weird thing about the CAC. They preach that they're in favor of free enterprise, but at the same time, they take public money and they throw it at businesses.
You know, there's a lot to discuss here, a lot that I think a lot of people didn't understand that are hearing this for the first time, thinking this seems incredible. But yeah, as you're describing it, Tom, it's a pretty awful situation. Tom,
there are really good companies. You know, think of a company like Kruger. They've got a big wind farm just off Montreal. They've invested heavily in cogeneration. They've invested heavily to be a very environmentally friendly company. Cascades, another good company in Quebec that's done that. So now they're going to watch the money flow from their taxes and yours and mine over to these other companies that are perpetual ne'er-do-wells. There's a real problem with that. We'll see if any of that is able to carry into the election, though.